Join with computer audio.
At your end, okay? All right, so here we go. All right, hi, I'm Mike Aoki. I want to welcome you to today's webinar. It's sponsored by LANtelligence and 8x8 in coordination as a joint event with GTACC, the Greater Toronto Area Contact Center Association. And I'm happy to welcome all of you to today's event. I also want to introduce today's panelist as well. So our panelist today is Roy Atkinson. And Roy is with Informa and is an expert in terms of looking at the customer experience field. And Roy's also been chosen as one of the top 50. I see my top 50 customer service thought leaders on Twitter, actually several years in a row. And it was just recently chosen actually as one of the top 25 customer experience thought leaders for the last decade. So quite an honor there, Roy, in terms of doing that. And again, I'm Mike Aoki, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. I'm out of Toronto. Roy right now is out of Greenville as well. So we've got a couple of perspectives here in terms of looking at the customer experience field. And the question with us today really is in terms of looking at how customer experience will change in an era of COVID-19. So with the coronavirus, how's it changing customer expectations in terms of what they're looking for from your contact centers? Also, all throughout today's session, feel free to go and jot down different tips and information that you want to take away with you. And also feel free to go and type in questions that you want to ask Roy in terms of where customer experience is headed. And you can do it by one of two ways. If you're on full screen right now with Zoom, if you look at the very bottom of the Zoom window, there's a toolbar at the very bottom. And in the center of that toolbar is the chat button. So you can click on the chat button and type in questions there. Or you can also click on the Q&A button and type in questions there. And as a moderator, I'll be looking at both of those windows to go and field your questions and actually answer them and say them out loud for Roy during the webinar. And we'll take questions throughout the webinar. So as you go through, feel free to ask any questions that you'd like. We'll also have some interactive polls as well showing up on screen, a couple of surveys at different points in the conversation as well, so you can just participate that way and also just vote in terms of your different responses that you want to go and check off on. Now, in terms of looking at polls, we'll actually start with the very first poll. And so I just want to go and launch this poll right now, and you should see this just in a few seconds on your screen. So the poll itself should be showing right now on your screen. The question is, do you feel that your company responded quickly enough to the pandemic? And you can vote on that by clicking on whichever of those three answers: extremely fast, wish it was faster, or our customers are happy. Whichever one of those things you think is the most appropriate one for your organization. And I'll give you a few seconds just to go and vote on that. And again, just click off whatever is the most appropriate response. And if you're just joining us right now, feel free to go and vote on the very first poll there in the center of your screen. Just click on the answer to the question: do you feel that your company responded quickly enough to the pandemic? And about half of you have voted right now, so give a few more seconds for the other half to go and vote. Again, you want your opinions known. All right, good. So we'll end the polling right now, and you can actually share these results. So actually share the results on screen. And that's actually really good news to go and hear about. You know, and Roy, I don't know if you have any comments on what you're seeing there on the survey, but extremely fast was the most popular answer. Roy?
I especially like the fact that our customers are not happy is blank. Nobody said that. That's great. That's absolutely fabulous. And I'm also impressed at the fact that so many of you feel that your company was extremely fast. That's wonderful news. And I tend to agree that most companies were very fast. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we go on.
Okay, perfect. All right, excellent. And so we'll take a look in terms of one of the first questions for you, Roy. And this one is, do companies need to remap their customer journeys? What are your thoughts on that now in terms of how COVID-19 has changed that whole customer journey piece?
I think in a large sense, it depends on the type of business that you're in and how you conduct business normally. I suspect that a lot of companies should have already revisited their customer journey maps because the experiences have changed. One thing we really have to remember about customer experience, and some people forget, believe it or not, in this industry, that it's really about the customer and the customer's perceptions. And you can design things beautifully from your perspective, but if your customers feel differently about it, oops, you missed the boat. And what you really want to track in your customer journeys is what they're actually doing. Let me give you an example about how the touch points might have changed. And when you make a journey map, of course, you're going from touch point to touch point to see how your customers are going to flow through whatever systems you have prepared for them. There's a local grocery store here near where I live. It's about 10 miles away. It's a tiny place. They specialize in overstocks from other supermarkets and food companies, and they're extremely inexpensive. They're known locally, but they only had a Facebook page. They didn't have anything else. People just know about them. And so they did a marvelous job of responding to this. They set up a complete website with the ability to put an order in. So their inventory system got put into the website. You can check their inventory. You can select the items you want. You can drive over there, and they will load them in your car. You never have to go inside the building. That all happened in a matter of probably 10 days. And so that's an example of how a customer journey changed. Normally, their journey would be people coming into the store, buying groceries, going home. That totally changed because of the pandemic and because of the circumstances around it. So you have to review what your touch points are. Are they still the same? Think about airlines. People aren't visiting airline customer service counters in airports right now. Not many, anyway. They're calling, they're texting, they're using self-service, and that's a big one. I'll come back to that a little bit. So there's new touch points that have been added, as I say in the second bullet point there. And you have to make sure that those new touch points, like that service of bringing groceries out to the car, has to be included in that customer journey map. It's new and it's different from what you were doing 6 months or 2 months or 4 months ago. And so you better update that and make sure that your map is still accurately reflecting the way that your company is doing business now.
So that makes perfect sense, Roy, in terms of looking at, those changes that are taking place as well. So in looking in terms of customer journeys itself, that's the first step of this. And of course, the second step is, what have the last few months shown about organizations' ability to respond quickly to changing conditions? What's happened in terms of the last couple of months?
It's really interesting to see the differences in companies and large or small, and not depending on industry, excuse me. For example, the one I just gave, the little local grocery store. We have other local shops that have done a terrific job of responding and being really inventive in ways to deliver food to people or to bring their service out to you, local cleaners and that. And on the other hand, a lot of large organizations have really fallen down. There's one organization that I do some business with, and I wanted to ask some questions, and I went to their website, and their chat response was over an hour wait. And if you went to their website and submitted a question, it told you right on the website that you shouldn't expect an answer until at least 48 hours later. And I thought, well, that's not really paying attention. And, obviously there are technological means to do this. And so you didn't have the right technology in place. And that means you didn't have the correct mindset in place to be thinking about your customer's experience in the first place. You were not able to respond. So some organizations have been extraordinarily responsive, and there's been so many inventive ways of serving customers and taking care of customers and supporting products and services over the last couple of months. It's really astounding. But where things have fallen apart, they've fallen apart badly. And I think that there will be many lessons learned coming away from this for everybody in the industry to look at, think about, and try to improve upon. And that's the big deal, right? If your organization is learning lessons right now, what are you going to do with those lessons afterwards? How are you going to change your approach to the customer experience afterwards? And what do you take away from what your company has done well or has not done well?
Okay, that's really interesting, Roy. And what are you hearing out there? I know you speak at a lot of different virtual events and have done a lot of webinars in the past and attended a lot of them as well. What are you hearing right now as far as, for a call center, contact center VP or director, what are some of the lessons learned just industry-wide that they should be focusing on in the next few months?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I'm hearing about, and I've been thinking about as well, is that guess what? Your people can work at home. Your people can work away from the office. That's probably the biggest lesson. A lot of organizations were not in any way, shape, or form prepared to have people working from home, and I think we might be able to use the second poll here, Ken, if you're in the background there. We might be able to use the second poll at this point, or Mike, you can launch it.
Okay.
And just as I touched on that, we might want to talk about that whole change that has taken place. So if you'd go ahead and do that, we can talk about that.
Okay, good. All right, so it's showing now on the screen for everybody. What was the prediction in 2019? Think back now 6 months ago, a year ago, on the percentage of workers who would be working from home. So go back in a time machine a year ago and think, what was your prediction back then? Then we'll talk about the numbers right now.
Yeah, it's the actual numbers are really fascinating.
Right. I'll just give a few more seconds for everyone else who hasn't voted yet to go and vote in terms of what was your prediction last year for the percentage working from home?
This will be fascinating.
Okay, so I'll end the poll right now and share the results so we can all see them.
Yeah.
And Roy, any comments?
That's pretty much what I expected to see. And actually, it was probably quite a bit lower than 20%, but 20% seemed to be a reasonable number. That's why we put it in the poll for you. But that's the predominant number. About 22% of you said 21 to 50%. So in the support center world, last year in 2019, 4% of organizations said that they were planning on implementing work from home during 2020. 4% said they were going to have people working from home. 32% of organizations said they had no plans to have anybody working from home in 2020. And so a couple of months later, those numbers got completely reversed, right?
Mm-hmm.
In many cases, unless you were in certain types of service provider classifications, essential services, et cetera, you would still be able to be in the office. But in most cases, people had to go home. And companies had to respond to that. And a lot of companies really did. I was talking to a group of healthcare companies, and there was one organization that had to hand out 500 laptops to people who never had laptops before within a week. 500 laptops had to go home with people, which means, of course, not only do they have to get the equipment, deliver the equipment to people where they are, but also support that. And some of these folks were dealing with very unfamiliar technology, which is another whole aspect to this. When you set up a contact center, even if you're all set up in the cloud and you're ready to go, do you have the right technology and the right working conditions for those people to be able to work from home? So this has all been a tremendous strain on contact centers and customers trying to get information, maybe not knowing exactly where to turn. And so it's been an amazing story, and kudos to everybody out there in the contact center world for doing the great work that you've been doing over the past few months.
Okay, good. Well, that's a good point, Roy. And just as a follow-up to that, I've got a question from Tim, one of the attendees today, who wrote in, my company 1 year ago had to mandate to people to pull people back into the office. And the idea was to build a consensus of continuity and improve management, like getting them back in the office. Tim mentions he's no longer with them, but how does management reconcile this mindset in terms of doing this, reconcile this mindset to improve and promote work from home people management? So how do you go from that mindset of everybody has to be in the office so I can keep control of them versus now they're at home? What do you do? How do you reinforce that? And how does it affect customer experience? And one of the reasons why, and also too, it's not just because of COVID-19, but also for other reasons as well. It could be like back to things like real estate costs or just flexibility for people. But how do you reconcile those two mindsets?
It's really tough. And I think that part of the deal is that we equate being busy with being productive. The people who have to keep an eye on everybody in the office, doing the prairie dog thing in a sea of cubicles, if managers are like that, a lot of times they're looking for people to be busy. Meanwhile, there's somebody off in the corner who's clicking on stuff on their screen, or making phony phone calls out if they're outbound, and they're not really getting anything done. But at the end of the month or the end of the week or however, whenever your metrics come up, you're going to see who's been productive and who hasn't been productive. You're going to be able to assess that, and you should have some technologies in place. And there's tons of technology out there, and you don't have to break your budget to do it. You can be very creative in ways to manage your people without being in the same room. And I've been a firm believer in work from home. The company that I work for, Informa Tech, about 30, actually globally, Informa, the parent company, about 30% of the people internationally, and very big in Asia, Pacific, and Europe, work from home. Mm-hmm. So it's a very remote organization. That doesn't mean things aren't happening. And I think that the difference between assessing activity and assessing productivity has to be a management priority. Look at what's really happening. Look at the results your people are getting. There shouldn't be that much of a difference between working from home and working in the office. In fact, what happens a lot of times is companies find out people are more productive working at home. They may be willing to put in a little extra time. One group of organizations that I was talking to, one of the people there said, since this happened, nobody has called in sick. Nobody has been 1 minute late. Everybody's been chipping in and getting stuff done. We're amazed at how well this has worked. And that was an organization that had no remote workers before this. So it really depends on how you assess it. The trick is that you have to provide similar ways for people to deal with each other. And of course, what we're doing right now, video calls, have become exceedingly important. That's why, the number of users of the Zoom platform has skyrocketed, because people want to connect with each other. And that's one of the things that you can do. You have instead of having your daily stand-up, have a stand-up on a video platform, Microsoft Teams or Zoom or some other platform where you can interface with each other, ask each other questions, bring up the most important things of the day, and then go your ways and monitor the work with your technology tools. But make sure you have some kind of personal connection. If you've got one-on-one meetings, same thing, do a video call with that person and make sure that the things get done that have to get done. The routines are important. The methods that you use to connect those routines are not necessarily important, right? As long as the thing itself happens.
Right. Okay, good. You brought up a really good point as well about, how call center leaders have to go and change the routines, as you mentioned it. The routines, they're structured to accommodate coaching work from home employees, and to go and have that same team cohesion and that same team morale as well. Because of course, how the frontline agents feel and how well they're supported will affect how well they can actually support their customers, right? And the customer experience that they'll get as well. So that's a really good point, Ryan. I really appreciate that. As well, another question for you is this: has the pandemic itself changed your perception of the value of customer service?
That, of course, is a tough one, and I think we're going to be doing a lot of assessing in retrospect, because we won't know for a little bit. But one of the things that, as I point out here, Zendesk published some data recently, and weekly tickets were up 24% over 2019 in the early months of 2020, which is amazing. It's up by a quarter. And I think that is in response to the types of questions that people are having, like, can I change my airline tickets? Can I get this online? How is this delivery going to happen? How do I get this service? I've contracted with you for a particular service. What am I going to do about that? You're supposed to come and install a new furnace in my house. Can you do that? I'm sure tons of questions, even more than issues coming up. But customers need to be able to connect with you. And I think that afterwards, what's going to show is that the organizations that really have delivered on their brand promise for good customer service and good customer experience are the ones that they're going to shine. And ones that haven't had that eye on the customer experience are going to come off as less than stellar. I think the value of customer service and customer experience is going to be shown to be higher than maybe a lot of organizations expected. Okay, good. So it sounds definitely want to sharpen that customer experience, customer service edge then, from the sound of it.
And just as a follow-up question to that, what kind of values now are becoming more important in terms of customer service? Is it speed of response? Because you mentioned something about speed delays, speed of response. Is it the kinds of offers that are made? Is it being proactively, offering discounts to customers? For the future, what are some of the big things that, companies can look for as far as making a difference or having an edge over the competition?
I think that being able to be human with the customers is top notch. Making sure that they're sensitive to the customer's issues, and even exceeding the monetary things, right? The discounts or the offers, is having that human touch, understanding where the customer's coming from, what their experience is like right now. As I said before, you can design the customer experience, but the customer has the experience. Ultimately, it belongs to them. And so to propose a solution for a problem that really makes no sense to somebody that can't get out of their apartment for 9 weeks, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So that sensitivity is really important. Companies that are doing that well are going to wind up shining for sure. And so stay focused on what the customer is going through and how their world has drastically changed over the last couple of months. That's going to be exceedingly important.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And how can the contact center contribute to that information gathering? Is it voice of the customer? Is it gaining feedback from all the agents? What can, again, call center leaders really do to gather up that info to help find out?
Nobody knows the customers better than the contact center, right? Yeah. They talk to customers every day. The important thing is that there's a culture of gathering that information, making sure that it's documented. So gather that information, even if it's a side comment from a customer, get as much of that information into your systems as you possibly can. And I think that management's responsibility is to go through those comments and look for areas that really need improvement or areas where they stood out and say, "Ooh, we were doing a really good job here. We didn't realize that." Maybe that's something that we can emphasize. Maybe that adds to our brand promise. Maybe that can go over to the marketing department and that's something that they can use. So what you do, gathering the data is one thing. What you do with that data is the really important thing. And so many companies, and Mike, you know this as well as I do, so many companies get tremendous amounts of data that they gather from whatever sources, voice of the customers, surveys, all of the different things that come in, but then they don't act on it. What are your customers suggesting? A lot of times customers will suggest things to you. It would have been better if I had been able to do X. Why doesn't your app do this? So that type of feedback is exceedingly important. So read through those verbatims. I know it's tough. There was one piece of work that I did recently where I had 38 printed pages worth of comments from one question. I know it's tough. Take the time and go through that, at least scan them and look for things that you can pull out and learn lessons from or change within your organization. So just do it. It's tough work, but you got to do it.
No, it sounds definitely you have to go and do that. And definitely the data gather is really important. As you said, doing something with the data is also important. And in terms of looking at analyzing that data, how will things like speech analytics technology really help impact that?
Well, that's huge. NLP, natural language processing, has come a long way, and being able to do amazing things with speech analytics is great. First of all, customer sentiment. You don't have to depend on an agent to tell you whether the customer was happy or sad or angry. You can see that, and that should be part of your quality assessments after the call, for sure. And using text analytics too for tweets or Facebook posts or texts or email messages that are coming in. Take a look at that. Same thing. Look at the customer sentiment. Look at what they're pointing out or where the hot areas are within the conversation. Didn't you pick up the phone fast enough? Didn't I get my call back when I was supposed to? Did you not respond to me the way I thought you should have? Did you ignore the real question? Did I have to get a thing escalated twice before I got an answer? All of those things the complaints are always pretty much the same. Either I couldn't get the question answered at the first try, right? Level 1 couldn't do anything for me, so I had to wait for an escalation, or you didn't answer it the way I expected you to, etc. Well, there's the old 227 going by, Mike.
I
I
hear
don't
a
know if you
train
can hear that.
train whistle in the
If
background.
you can hear that. But there is a train that goes by fairly close here, and nothing I can do about it. So,
Okay.
in any event, just use the tools that you have to assess what your customer input is. That's how you improve the customer experience. Customer experience depends on getting feedback in as near real time as possible.
And that makes sense too, especially with the coronavirus right now. Things are changing so fast. You've got to get the data and do something with it fast. And I love that message that you're sharing, Roy. And I have the question from the audience as well. This is from Tim. Again, in terms of this one, is a focus now the need to publish info online about fluid issues? Again, things moving very quickly to deflect calls without needing to personally answer every customer question, especially since some of those answers may be the same as what other customers are asking about. So updating your online FAQs, for instance, rapidly, is that a good strategy to help deflect calls?
There is nothing I think of being as more important right now overall than making sure that any self-service systems that you have are up to date, responsive, and reflect actual questions from customers. A lot of organizations have FAQs. Recently in some research that we did, it was 83% of organizations said that their FAQs were written by support staff. Well, okay, those aren't really frequently asked questions then, are they? They're questions we think people are going to ask. Generally speaking, we can predict some of the questions they're going to ask, but they're going to ask about stuff we wouldn't think of because they're not us. We have to get out of our own brains and think from outside in and gather those questions. Again, going through the documentation that develops from a conversation or from ticket logging or however you get it. It's important to sort through that, pull out the relevant information and construct those questions. Ask the questions that customers really ask and give them the answers. There's great technology out there for this. Maybe some of the companies here represented here are into it. You've got virtual agents, you've got chatbots. A lot of that is driven by machine learning, so it improves over time. It's contextual, so that it depends on what the customer is asking about and where they are on your website, that kind of thing. But make sure that you leverage that technology. There's so much of it, and as I say, it's not going to break your bank in a lot of cases. Some cases, if you want to get a really sophisticated system, yeah. But do the best you can to give real answers to the questions that customers are asking, and make sure that that is constantly updated. Knowledge management right now is one of the most important things across the board, whether we're talking about customer support and contact centers, whether we're talking about technical support for information technology, doesn't matter. Knowledge management is super important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's the whole thing, is that the knowledge management piece and doing it quickly and accurately and having it apply to what your customers are looking for. So it's updating FAQs, knowledge bases, whatever that is, again, keeping up to speed. And that really demands a lot of discipline from contact center leaders, doesn't it? For them to be able to help, have that discipline to actually put these systems in place and make those changes and bring the technology on board. I know you mentioned some of the providers like LANtelligence and 8x8 who are sponsoring this webinar. They do a lot of that work as well. And I want to go to your next question, Roy, which is about technology. And that's, what technologies have become more valuable to customer-facing organizations because of the pandemic?
Again, I would immediately default to self-service. Having a good self-service system, however you deliver that, whether it's a list of FAQs on your website, whether you have an interactive response system, whether it's on your IVR, or it's, if you have an intelligent-driven IVR, or you have a chat bot, however it is that you deliver that information, it should be complete and up-to-date and responsive. And also, don't dead end the customer. That's a typical mistake. When you've got a chatbot, it runs out of answers if it's keying off your knowledge base and you haven't thought about that. You should never leave the customer at a dead end. That happens on IVR stuff as well. You get to a spot on the menus where you run out of responses because you're not asking the right questions. So that is super important. And companies that had, as I said, companies that have done so can no longer ignore digital options. You've got to be thinking about apps, right? Everybody wants to be mobile. Everybody wants to have everything right here. You've got to be able to provide it in one way or another, however that is. Websites, important, but whatever technology you're using to respond. Omni-channel. And real omni-channel is the ability to carry data from any channel in one common pool. That's the basis of omni-channel, or interconnected data, so that we don't have to do the second thing that customers hate, which is ask them to repeat information. I find that extremely tedious. Mike, you're nodding, you do too. Most customers do. When you're in that situation and you get, just answered, the IVR has prompted you for the last 4 digits of your social security number, or the last 4 digits of your credit card, or your account number, or something. You've put that in there. It confirms it with you. It says, is your name this? You could say press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. We've all been through that. And then the first thing that happens when you get to a live agent is, hi, who am I speaking with? You should know that. That should be in front of you. I shouldn't have to tell you again. And the same should be true whether it's through Twitter or Facebook or telephone or email. Once that information is in, it should be in that common data pool, so that if that gets transferred to a different channel, that information goes with it. That's omni-channel. And what that does is it gives you so much information about the customer. What are their channels of preference? What do they get upset about? Where do we need to take them in order to answer their question? Because you can't answer everything in a tweet, right? You're a legal organization. You can't give legal advice on social media. That would be a very bad idea. Financial information, you can't do that on Facebook. So you've got to change the channel. You have to learn how your customers will proceed, what the questions are that they're asking. Use that data. I can't stress that strongly enough. So omni-channel is a really good place to be right now. Multi-channel is fine, but what that means is information is going to get lost between point A and point B. Copy and paste is only as good as where the mouse is when you do it. And it's easy to lose information when you do that, or paste it into the wrong ticket, or put it in the wrong chat, or whatever. I've done it, trust me. So that's important. And get that customer data in a common source, or a set of interconnected common sources. APIs are very common, so applications can talk to each other. Make sure that that's happening. Get a 360 view of the customer as best you can. You can't learn everything about them, but you can learn a lot from how they behave. What happens when they're on your website for 5 minutes looking at self-help and they get frustrated? What do? Do they email you? Do they chat you? Do they call you? Learn their tendencies. And again, that's part of your customer journey map, right? That all feeds back into the same overall customer experience.
Okay, that's really important too. And it's funny where you mentioned these trends in terms of omni-channel, for instance, digital transformation. They've been around for a couple of years right now, but do you find with coronavirus it's actually accelerating the pace of that change, or more importantly, the demand for that change from customers?
Sure. I think that probably, at least at the beginning of this, more customers overall were contacting organizations, right? That 24% spike in tickets that Zendesk talks about is one indication of that. And customers are going to approach you in whatever channel they choose. Some of us like to do email. Email's hard to handle from the contact center end for lots of reasons. It's probably easier to handle phone calls, but more expensive. They're going to contact you in whatever channel they choose. And the more complex the request is, the more likely they're going to want to deal real time with a human being. If it's an easy request or an easy issue to solve, they're going to be fine finding it on their own, looking at a support article, clicking on a few links and getting it done. If it involves, I can give you an example. Someone that I know recently experienced the death of a family member, and they've been trying for 2 months to get their phone company to terminate their contract. This person is no longer on the planet, and they still can't get this company to respond properly. So, there needs to be some type of real human contact. You can't expect the technology to do everything. And complexity is the real pivot point there. So make sure you know what's going on.
Okay, so definitely the execution is really important to make sure it's executed properly in this, and the speed of response is there. That also brings back my really interesting point to your question. This is from Brad, actually, who's watching this. His question is, what impact have you seen in volume or reliance on the phone versus other channels? And I know we've heard some anecdotal evidence about how phone's been more important in the last couple of months because people are worried, anxious, want to talk to a warm voice, etc. But what's your research showing right now? What are you seeing out there in the field as far as phone versus the other channels that are out there with COVID-19?
Phone is not going away anytime soon, but the dependence on phone as a primary customer service channel has decreased. It used to be about 93% of your traffic came over the phone, which is why contact centers were called call centers, because that's what happened. The phone rang all day. Not so much anymore. People have found alternate means to contact us, and that's okay. That was the power, by the way. So our thunderstorm is close by. We're still on. But the alternate channels, social media has become exceedingly important. WhatsApp, right? Facebook Messenger is a big channel. Text messaging, SMS has become important. Social media, Twitter, customer service via Twitter has become exceedingly important. So the overall percentage of the traffic into the contact center, phone is going down, but it's still going to be important for a long time to come. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. But it is becoming less important than it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you think that sort of the more recent sort of phone blip just recently with coronavirus, that's sort of a temporary blip in that sense? It should resume and kind of subside back into other channels and go back to that pattern? I
do think that, and I think part of that was people wanted immediate service, and maybe the customer service organizations were just ramping up to be able to handle the amount of traffic they're getting. Mm-hmm. And so people wanted information. Again, they wanted to talk to somebody. They wanted to talk to a human. That they wanted that connection. But I think that is pretty much temporary. I don't think that the phone traffic is going to continue to escalate upwards. I think it will tail off, and companies have responded in ways to allow customers to get the information quickly online or via an app or however they do it. So phone overall is going to slowly tail off, but it's not going to go away.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. That sounds excellent as well. And again, just looking at what the patterns are and how those patterns affect people as well. I also want to just read a response as well. This is from Marty Tracy with LANtelligence. And I just want to read this out loud. It's actually quite interesting. You can see it in the chat window as well if you want to read it directly through there. The response from Marty is that we've seen an escalation in the shift to alternative channels to the tune of upwards of 30%. To support this change, it is crucial to have a solution that allows the customer to escalate to a direct engagement chat or voice. Again, speed of response being critical. And voice is still the best channel for complex issues. So Roy, you said that as well, the emotional side of things. People are panicking about things going on right now with coronavirus and the impact financially, that they want to talk to somebody live. They want to be heard in that sense. And then having said that, with that said, there's some amazing new solutions for interacting with customers real time via chat, video, etc., other channels as well. And the most important channel we see is that great new technology is mobile. And again, a lot of people are using their smartphones now to connect with companies. And so mobile apps are really important. And Roy, you mentioned that as well. And there's some amazing solutions that connect agents to mobile users and allow secure sharing of lots of information, from pictures to more secure information as well. So it gets back into, again, those authorization channels, encryption, etc. But a lot of technology. So Marty's echoing, Roy, what you said, which is so much of the technology is out there. The key, again, as a contact center leader, VP director, is just to be aware of what's out there and to make sure that your contact center is staying state of the art that way. So definitely for question number 4, what technologies, it's a huge issue. So Roy, great points in terms of the stats that you brought to the table as well. And Brad, thanks for asking that question. And Marty, thanks for that information as well. So again, looking at technology, the next step is to think about what mistakes might companies make in the coming months. Again, looking forward for customer experience regarding customer relations and customer experience. So what are some mistakes you might want to watch out for if you're a contact center leader, Roy?
I think the biggest mistake is to ignore what you've learned. There's a friend of mine, Matthew Hooper, who is a leader in a technology company. And he says that companies tend to rely, instead of relying on data, they rely on what he calls the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. So what the boss wants, the boss gets, regardless of the fact that all the data says that we should be doing something else. So make sure that you're paying attention to the data that you're getting. Review the metrics and KPIs. Make sure that you're measuring the right stuff. That has changed. So the trick here is going to be that you won't be able to compare the last couple of months with last year. You're not going to be able to see those clear year-over-year types of stats where the growth or decline in certain whatever. We were just talking about channels. Will the phone stats from this year reflect the changes that happened last year? I don't think so, not for these few months anyway, and maybe not going forward, but so review them. Ask yourselves if you are gathering the right metrics. Are your key performance indicators the right key performance indicators? And so you've got to think about which metrics are important to you now, which ones are going to be important going forward, knowing that you're not going to have a clear comparison with the metrics that you gathered even a few months ago. There won't be a valid comparison. So, and I mentioned in this one that which metrics best reflect customer experience for your organization. I have some strong opinions on that. If you'd like me to share them, I'd be happy to, Mike.
Sure, please go ahead. We definitely want to learn these.
And I think that especially now, customer experience, because the customer effort score is going to be paramount. NPS has been around for a long time now. And NPS is a good single question survey. It's nice to have. I think ultimately customer effort is a better reflection of what's actually going on. And maybe you can combine the customer effort score question with your NPS or CSAT, however it is that your organization measures. If you're not familiar with customer effort score, it's a single question and you can ask it either way. You can say, how difficult was it to get your issue resolved, or how easy was it to get your issue resolved, and adjust your scale accordingly. You can go 0 to 5, 0 to 10, and then measure, if difficult is 10, what does it look like? Are people rating you an 8 or people rating you a 1? And you can decide if lower is better or higher is better. It's a great survey question to ask. And effort is so important, especially now. Look at a person who is at home working or trying to work. And I recently heard a CEO describe it as, hey, I'm not working from home. I'm at home trying to work. Why is that? Well, because you've got to school the kids and take care of that. You've got to worry about your spouse. You've got to worry about a whole bunch of other things while you're trying to get work done. What's going on in the background? Are the dogs barking? All of the good stuff that goes on. Is there a train going by? Is there a thunderstorm coming? All of those things that are happening right now. And now I want to try to resolve a problem with a company. Are they making it hard for me to do that? I don't need that. I'm going to be really upset by the time I do get a hold of them if they're making it hard for me, if I'm waiting on hold for an hour and a half before I even get somebody to pick up the phone and then the call drops. Ouch. You don't want that to happen. So the effort that it takes the customer to get their issue resolved or get their question answered, I believe is going to be paramount. That's really, really important.
Okay, good. Excellent. And that's a key metric as well that to go look forward to in terms of just surveying and checking for that as well. I just want to add another point too. This is from Brad, who's just watching this webinar. And his point was he's saying he's seen a large retailer significantly reduce the use of their voice and phone channel with email tickets and with chat tickets as well. And actually with the email ticket and chat volume spiking by 5 times. So again, it just shows in terms of where customers are going and what channels they prefer to use, what's easiest or I guess the least amount of effort for them, as well as what really satisfies them the most. And so it does shift sometimes. I know some have gone more phone heavy the past 2 months in terms of COVID-19. Other ones have gone more towards, in this case, as Brad's example, more towards email and chat tickets as well. So it's just being there though where your customers are. And that's one of the biggest keys as well. So great points, Roy. I appreciate that. And Brad, thanks for bringing that up as well. Another question we have for you is in terms of looking at this, in terms of what particular disciplines do you feel that contact centers and companies in general, will learn to value in 2020?
I think the discipline of listening is super important. Paying attention to the data. It's really easy for us to gather data. We have too much of it in a lot of cases, but it's what you do, again, as I said earlier, it's what you do with the data that matters. What action do you take? Make sure that what you're gathering is actionable. Not one of my favorite words, but I'll use it. Make sure that you can take action on the information that's in front of you, and make sure that you're getting the right information. So paying attention to what your metrics look like, what your KPIs are, and again, assess the impact of work from home. For sure is going to have impact on things like speed of answer. It might be faster. We don't know yet, or maybe some of you do. What's the difference in handle time? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? Getting the information quickly, as Marty pointed out, and I'll point out as well, getting the information to the customer rapidly is exceedingly important, especially in times of crisis like this. It's going to be super important for customers to have that information and be able to do what they need to do and get their issues taken care of as rapidly as possible. And the last bullet point there, what's expected when and if agents return to the contact center? Yeah, what's going to happen in terms of the metrics that we're gathering them, and how will we compare them to previous months? That's going to be another tough question, and it's going to take a lot of discussion and a lot of management decision. And when and if is a big question. Just in the last couple of days, we've seen Facebook saying that they're going to continue to have people working from home. Twitter is going to continue to have people working from home. Google is going to continue to have people working from home. What are going to be the ripple impacts of that? Will other companies follow suit? I don't know. Again, we have learned a tremendous amount from this. It's going to take months to assess it and digest it all. But you really got to think about how you have your information gathered and collected and make it accessible to whom it needs to be accessible. Your senior managers might want to know a lot of this stuff because they've got to make decisions about which direction the company's going to take going forward and how they're going to spend money, which technologies are going to be bought over the next year. So the impact is immense, and the discipline of data management and knowledge management, exceedingly important.
Okay, good. And Roy, you're really bringing this up at the right time, because I know for a lot of contact center leaders, the last 2 months have been spent just trying to transition people to work from home and trying to do a major digital transformation on the fly, basically, in the midst of coronavirus. And now the last week, couple of weeks, maybe even this week coming up, they're finally getting a chance to catch their breath and say, wow, what happened? Where did the last 9 weeks go? And now what do we do going forward? And so those are great questions for them to ask themselves in terms of, are they going to have their reps, their agents work from home or come back to the office? If they're going to work from home, what do they do with all that real estate now, all that office space now? How do they handle the knowledge information pieces, the knowledge base, the information itself? How do they forecast things going forward? So great questions. I love that we're bringing up here.
There's another side of that as well. And that's okay. They've invested in the technology to have people working from home. They've bought extra software licenses. They've given people laptops. Now what? If people come back in, what about all that licensing? What about all that hardware? What happens to that? So that's going to play into those decisions as well. It's a lot of financial decisions to be made.
Okay, good. But it's good to know those are considerations for it. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Roy. And the last question for you, the last sort of schedule question we have on here is, will any particular metric emerge from the pandemic as being more valuable for measuring customer experience and or predicting loyalty?
I'm going to fall back on customer effort score. NPS, everybody knows, was designed to be a predictor of loyalty. If you do it right, it can be, for sure. But effort is so important now. I really think that CES, customer effort score, is going to shine as being a very good metric to help us understand our customers' sentiment better and be able to predict whether or not they're going to be customers for life or customers for next week.
Okay, good. All right, that's important to know as well. And speaking of customers for life or for next week, what other factors do you think are entering in from the customer's viewpoint in terms of their loyalty to an organization? I've heard some rumors that customers are now more price sensitive, for instance, because of obvious financial issues. So how does that affect, how does coronavirus right now affecting things like loyalty, price sensitivity, et cetera?
That's a really good point. And as we know, unfortunately, a lot of people either temporarily or perhaps permanently have lost income due to this. And we don't know what the effects are going to be coming out, which companies are going to come back fully, which ones are not going to be able to make it back at all. The financial questions are enormous. A lot of that depends on the market that your organization serves. Are you a high-end premium market? Neiman Marcus declared bankruptcy. Surprise, surprise, right? Granted, they're primarily brick and mortar, but still, that's a huge, huge thing. So you're not immune to this because you have a very high-end, desirable, highly rated product. You better be thinking about how your company does respond to the customer in every respect. And if they have far less to spend now, you better be looking at ways that you can get them to keep buying from you, even though your price might have to be lowered. The other thing is, I think that, let's be honest here, customers have become focused much more on what's actually important in their lives. And if you have a product or service that's essential to that customer, then great. If you have something that is maybe might be nice to have if you want a lot of status around it, then you might want to reassess your product placement and how you're approaching your customers, because some of that business may tail off, specifically because of the financial situation. So this all comes out of customer experience. Again, the customer is the one that's doing the experiencing. If I'm a customer and I've lost my income, my experience is I can't buy your stuff anymore, or I can't afford to pay for your premium service level anymore. There's an interesting indicator, right? So a lot of companies have, if you get this level of service, you get extra things for your customer service and customer interactions. Well, are they going to be able to do that now? Or are you going to have to offer what would have been premium service at a lower price point or for free, at least temporarily? There's lots of questions here that it's going to take some time to sort out. I wish I had, fully formed answers and great predictions. So I've become Karnak the Great and give you the magic formula, but it's going to take a while to sort out.
Well, I think the last 9 weeks have been so chaotic as well. People are still trying to figure out, right, sift through all the data that you mentioned. But you brought up some good questions as well, based upon sectors and based upon, again, where customers are positioned in terms of how their financial situation is. And in terms of, we've asked sort of Q&A questions all the way throughout this session. I want to thank all the people that have asked questions and made comments as well. So Tim, Brad, Marty, thanks for bringing up questions and making comments as well through today's webinar. As well, just one final question for you, Roy, is this: any final advice for contact center leaders, VPs, directors, on what they can do to help prepare to provide a greater customer experience going forward now?
I will say one more time, and then you're allowed to hit me with the big Nerf bat that says, okay, you've said it, Roy.
Okay.
The customer owns that experience. There's lots of information out there about customer experience that doesn't talk about the customer at all, which boggles my mind. I don't understand that. What you need to do is pay attention to what your customer is actually doing, gather that data, digest it as close to real time as possible. Don't be afraid to make changes on the fly. Think through it, but act rapidly. Assess your position and move. Work in tandem with the senior levels of your organization. Look at the financial planning. Look at the changes that you might have to make and decide where the money can be best spent. Be flexible and throw your strategy out. Strategy meetings happen roughly once a year in most companies anyway. Don't be afraid to throw your strategy out, because everything has changed now. Re-strategize and maybe frequently review that every quarter, perhaps, and take it from there. And don't be afraid to be flexible. That would be my biggest advice.
Okay, great. Roy, thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks for all your answers in the last hour as well. And also the questions that you've raised for people. It gets us thinking about what to go and do moving forward, especially becoming more proactive now that sort of the initial couple of months are done and a lot of people are working from home. Now, what's the next wave coming up and getting ahead of that wave for customer experience? So Roy, thank you very much for sharing that with us today. Thank you. All right, and I also want to just do a couple of quick little wrap-up announcements as well. One of them is in terms of looking at GTACC, the Greater Toronto Area Contact Center Association. For those who are in the Canadian side of the border, there's also, and also throughout North America, there are more webinars coming up as well. So there's one scheduled for next week. Coming up for Friday, May 29th. And you can check on GTACC's website. So GTACC/COVID-19, no hyphen in there. And you can look at actually webinars that are coming up from the Canadian point of view for that. Also want to mention as well, there is one event coming up, and this one's available all across North America. It's actually for a charity. So it's a fundraiser for a charity. It's called Unsung Heroes. And it's a really great event that can be done virtually now. A lot of contact centers in the Greater Toronto area are already involved in this, where you can actually sponsor different basically sing-alongs, basically, and sort of entertainment by the web as a way to go and help boost company morale and also help tie your work-at-home agents together in a common event, common virtual event that can actually help them be able to not only donate money or raise money for charity, but also be able to go and help boost your employee engagement and morale as well. So I want to mention that. And for more information, you can go to the website that's listed there at the very bottom of the page. And the last thing I want to do is also thank 8x8 and LANtelligence for sponsoring today's event and working with GTACC to be able to put on today's webinar. It was a great example of being able to go and help work together, both organizations, Canada and the US, all across North America, to be able to go and deliver this webinar to you. And I also want to thank you as well for being a part of today's webinar. So Roy, thank you for being on the panel. And all of you that are watching this webinar or watching the recording later on, I want to thank you as well for this. And I want to wish you as well a great weekend. And for those of you in the US, a great long Memorial Day weekend as well. So thanks a lot, everybody, and take care. Okay, thanks.